Hello and welcome to C-Suite Secrets. I'm Heather Parsons, your host, serial entrepreneur, fractional CFO, and a business strategist. I've spent years juggling family and business while helping entrepreneurs scale, optimize cash flow, and build real financial success. On our show, we bring you real conversations with founders, executives, and operators about what actually moves the needle in their business. No fluff, no filler, just smart strategy, systems that work, and insights that you can put to use in your business right away. With that, let's dive in. Today, we have Olga Topchaya on our show. Olga, welcome.
Hi, glad to be here.
Glad to have you. I look forward to our conversation today. I love talking to women in the tech space, so glad to have you.
Thank you.
So I'd love it if you can start us off and tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started and what led you to where you are today.
Yes, absolutely. So my background is actually in marketing and product, and that's something that I was doing for over 10 years, almost 15 years before launching my own company. How I got started is a fascinating journey. Uh, AI was not the plan, definitely. I was in tech for a number of years. I was doing marketing and product across a number of different industries, but in the latter part of my career, I was in tech for about 6 years or so. And then I went on parental leave, and this was in 2022. And as I'm getting ready to come back, that is when the worst tech recession hits. So maybe you remember this is like post COVID, over hiring in the tech field. Everyone is being laid off, hundreds of thousands of people, so I'm competing with all the FANG and everyone across the country, across the globe, really. And I decided, all right, well, I'm going to take a step back and hang out with my kid for a little bit instead of just sending out resumes into a void and crying myself into a pillow.
Right.
And really see what is my next step in the career. Sometimes you gotta just kind of take a pause. And that's when I discovered AI. And this was before the ChatGPT boom. I mean, it was at that point a model called DaVinci 3. It was the model was called GPT-3, but it was DaVinci 3. And I stumbled upon what was OpenAI's playground back then. So ChatGPT did not exist. AI as we know it today was not at all the case. It was very archaic. I call it a glorified autocorrect because that's kind of what it was. But I knew right away that this is going to be just so big and it is going to transform the way that we do business, the way that we work, the way that we study, the way that we interact with each other. And it's true and it's happening and I see it now. And I said, okay, well, I need to learn. That's what I need to do. I need to learn. There was no information out there, right? This point,
Right.
nobody knows anything. So I'm like, all right, well, I start digging through like some random YouTube videos of like influencers in this space that are like teaching how to prompt. And I start joining hackathons. I start just talking to people, researchers, professors, engineers, anyone that I could find in the space that would talk to me, that would give me the time of day, I start talking to. And then I finally got my foot in the door as a prompt engineer for a company called Copy AI. They were one of the first, it was called a wrapper. They did more than just that, to be fair, but they were really one of the first AI companies that was leveraging the OpenAI technology, which was incredible. Fantastic company, and that was a contract position. And then ChatGPT came out, so they had to really pivot. And so they let go of all their contractors. And I'm like, oh,
Right.
here we go again. But then I got another contract. And then it was for another AI company, and this time in the product and marketing side. And then I got another contract for an insurance company and for prompt engineering. And then another contract, and another, and another. So all these contracts just kind of kept coming up. People weren't interested in full time, but they were interested in AI. They were interested in consulting. And so I had this and this is something that I was able to offer to businesses. Soon after, I realized that I need to be more than just consulting or prompt engineering. I need to, in order to really have a company that can succeed and really offer businesses a full-scale solution, you need to have that development component, because otherwise it's kind of just talk, and companies need more than that. I'm not a developer, but I can hire developers. That's what entrepreneurs do when we don't have the skills ourselves. So we go and hire people who do. So at that point, I had made connections already with some really talented people in the space, and who I really trusted, who I had been working with already. And that's how Lapis was born. And now we are offering 3 services to our clients. It's AI strategy, where we determine what does your business really need from an AI perspective, and what problems are you solving? Can AI help here? Is it off-the-shelf solutions that are potentially going to be solving your problem, or do you need something custom built? If it's off-the-shelf solutions, great. We can go and select a suite of tools for you, so you're not spinning your wheels, going out there trying to figure out 1,000 different tools. It's very overwhelming for people. They don't know what works, what doesn't work for their specific situations. We do. If it's not, then because maybe people have some compliance, HIPAA compliance, SEC compliance, right? Any kind of risk they need to mitigate, any kind of technologies that need to integrate that maybe don't play nicely together always, then we will build something custom. Or maybe they need to scale, we will build it. And then the final component is training, because at the end of the day, you can have the best strategy, you can have the best technology, but if your people are not using it, or they're not using it properly, then you just kind of blew a bunch of time and money out the window. So training your people on how to use the tools and how to use them properly is absolutely critical. And that's the third part of our service.
I love it. And I love your journey. And, even when we were talking before, approaching AI not necessarily from a tech perspective, but from a marketing and a product perspective, I think is such a huge advantage. I was talking to somebody earlier today about that. Technology is wonderful, but technology is here to enable businesses. So the business is why we're here to start with. And then we have the technology that helps us get where we need to go with that.
Yeah.
So I love what you're doing there.
Thank you. Exactly.
So, a couple of questions I have around that. For folks who are trying to figure out, you mentioned all these overwhelming tools. If they're trying to figure out where to get started with AI in general, what would you recommend, and where would you recommend that they go to just learn more?
Yes. So, if you've never had any exposure to AI whatsoever, ChatGPT or Gemini, those are great starting points. So instead of Googling something, ask ChatGPT. Whatever question comes to mind, you want to look something up, instead of asking Google, ask ChatGPT, and ask in natural language. That's for folks who have never had any exposure to AI. It's a very good starting point, and it's a good way to kind of just get a sense of what it's capable of. Ask it, what can you do? It will tell you. For people who have an idea of what it is that they want to do, but maybe they're very overwhelmed with tool selection, there is a framework that we've developed. It's called the Impact Framework. This goes also similar for even if you're building your own tool. You would start with intention. What is it that you want your tool to achieve? So don't just go out and say like AI design software. What is the software supposed to achieve specifically for you and for your company? Meaning. How does it enhance or simplify a process that you're trying to accomplish? Internal, external, doesn't matter. It's supposed to either enhance or simplify it in some way. You really want to have this very clearly mapped down, write it down, and make sure that your team and your stakeholders are aligned for what the tool is supposed to accomplish. because otherwise, what we found is that team members will say, oh, well, I thought I was supposed to do this. And it's like, oh, no, I thought I was supposed to do this. And you have a lot of misalignment within the
Right.
team. All right. So you really want to make sure that you have kind of in writing and that everyone is aware of what the tool is supposed to accomplish. P, pricing. Does it fit your budget? Obviously, you have to be able to afford it. So you want to make sure. I always recommend people that are buying off-the-shelf tools to start with a free trial or a freemium of some kind, especially if you're new to AI. If you're not new to AI, that's a different story. But if you are new to AI, I really recommend starting. There's many, many tools out there. Just try them out before fully committing to make sure that it is actually going to accomplish what you want it to do. A, accuracy. What degree of precision do you require? Are you okay with 50%? Are you okay with 80%? AI is never going to give you 100%. Don't expect 100% accuracy. We always advise a human in the loop. So don't replace your people. Don't let all your people go just because you now have an AI tool. Think of it more like an intern or a junior employee, maybe mid-level at best, right? But certainly not your senior folks. You're always going to have someone who is going to need to check the work, just like you would of a junior employee or even a mid-level employee, right? Someone needs to check the work. So what degree of accuracy do you require? Let's say you have a tool that's 80% effective versus a tool that's 90% effective. Well, they're not going to necessarily be a 10% difference in cost. It is incredibly more difficult to build a tool that is 90% accurate than it is 80% accurate. So it's an exponential curve when it comes to accuracy and cost. So really just be very honest with yourself in terms of what degree of accuracy you can accept and don't expect perfection. C, customization.
I'd like to dive into that real quick if you
Yeah,
don't mind.
yeah, absolutely.
So on that accuracy part, can you give just a couple of examples on where you would really need to be at that 90% level versus maybe a 60 to 70%?
Sorry, what do you mean, where would you need to be?
So like what processes would require that higher
Right.
level, almost perfect accuracy? So would it be more around compliance
Yeah,
and that
I
sort of
see,
thing,
I see,
or
I see.
how would you
Okay.
differentiate?
Yeah. So by the way, 90%, just so you know, is super doable. It's and products that we build also we are typically even more than 90% accurate. Just putting that out there. So it's not like it's impossible to get 90%. But yeah, anything that is legal compliant when you're dealing with customers or customer service, you want to be careful with that, right? You don't want your customer service bot giving your customer a wrong answer. So it's always good to
Oof,
have
yeah.
citations. Yeah, we always recommend, first you want to have a disclaimer that says like, okay, AI can make mistakes. Always disclaim to your customers that they're interacting with AI, and always have citations so that the end user can click and see where is the information coming from. Risk, compliance, absolutely. Anything with math at all, any numbers whatsoever, need to have, we don't advise using large language models if you're doing any kind of a numerical analysis that can be, they're still suffering from quite a bit of hallucination when it comes to that. So it's subpar, but there are ways around it. You can certainly do it. You just exercise extreme caution when using large language models and numerical analysis.
I love that. I always ask it to show me its work. Like,
Yes,
what formula did
exactly.
you
Show me your
use?
work. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Show me your work. I think step by step that will give it, can also force it to kind of slow down its thinking. So
right,
it'll get it to literally think step by step the way a person does.
right.
Yes. Anything where your legal team will come to you and say like, "Hey, watch out," right? That's where you want to have higher precision. Things, that are more like creative, artistic, right? You can have lower degree of precision there.
Love it. Okay. Thank you so much. I
Yeah,
appreciate that.
absolutely. So next, C, customization. Can it adapt to your environment? How well can it adapt to your environment? Whether you're buying a $20 tool or even a free tool, or you're building something highly, highly custom for your team, there's always going to be some kind of customization that you're going to need to a degree. You want to make sure you have those requirements mapped out ahead of time, right?
That's a great point. It takes me back as well to knowing what your systems are.
Yeah.
Like, where are the key points that you need to really integrate here? So, like, for us, for example, I use a lot of Zapier stuff to make these connections with, whether it's my note taker and ClickUp or whatever it is, knowing what pieces, parts need to really touch each other is super crucial.
Yeah. And, you may decide like, okay, well, in an ideal world, we want all these pieces to talk to each other. But right now, for the sake of time, right, for the sake of cost, for the sake of team adoption, or a million other reasons, we're going to say that we're going to build something standalone, or it's only going to touch one piece of the puzzle. So these are conversations you need to have, within your team, or you hire a consultant, however it is you decide to go. And these are pros and cons that you have to weigh, because the more complexity that you layer, the slower it is going to take to roll out, right? The more time is going, this is the time component, right? The next piece is time. How fast can your team adopt the tool? Is there a learning curve to it? Or is it complex to build, right? Or is are there going to be a lot of requirements that you need to go through because of legal compliance, security, any other department, any other stakeholders that need to get involved? So time is absolutely critical. You may decide, you know what, it's not worth it to have all these systems talk to each other. I just want my people to get up and running ASAP. Let's just get something standalone for $20 a month and have them go, right? And then we will get to the last piece, which is scale. Will your tool accommodate your growth? And that's when you say, okay, and then as we scale, right, whether it is our team internally, or whether we begin to get new customers, or we expand locations, we are geographically, whatever the case is, however it is you define scale, documents, for example, maybe you have a lot of data that needs to scale, right? As we scale, then we will explore other tools. So this is the impact framework. So I'll go through it again, right? So impact, intention, meaning, pricing, accuracy, customization, time, and scale. And you think of it as a system that works together. And then with all these pieces mapped out and defined in place, then you can really get going, and then you can really roll things out.
I love it. I think that framework is wonderful. And for those folks listening, make sure you hit each of those pieces. And if you're not sure where these intersections are at, that's a great time to have a discussion with your technology person on your team, or your finance person, or somebody else to help you kind of map these parts and put it together. Because the last thing anyone wants is to spend all this time, effort, and energy and then have a product that doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly.
So one question I have for you around some of that, you talk about product discipline and how great tech still fails. So I'd love to hear some of the guardrails that you all put in place to make sure that folks are getting what they really need, rather than the new shiny object that's sitting on the shelf.
Yeah. So one of the mistakes I see companies make is trying to swallow the ocean when they first roll out AI. They try to AIify their entire operation. They try to have every feature under the sun, or they try to outsource to AI their core operations, the thing that like they build their company
Ooh,
on. These are
don't do
not
it.
things that AI should do, or at least not yet. Maybe one day
Right.
we'll get there. I don't know. Maybe one day we will, but we're not there yet. And so what ends up happening is you get stuck in AI purgatory, as I call it, where you have this like POC that just like never goes anywhere and takes a year to build. Or you have a situation where you roll out AI, but it doesn't perform well. And so adoption is low, or people are just not happy because, the results aren't great. Or you have, maybe you expose yourself to a bunch of risk in legal and compliance, customer risk, and myriad of other risks. So we always advise start small. That's the first thing. Start small, pick one use case and get really, really good at it. Make sure that that specific thing works very well. Don't have a million different features. Like you don't need it to begin with. You want to make sure it works well and you want to make sure your people are using it. Your people are not going to care about a million features from the very beginning. In the beginning, they care that it works and that it gets that job done. Maybe it won't be for every person in the company. Maybe it'll be for one team or for one department. But they'll be then your poster children for AI. So you start with them, you start with one use case, and then you have your little like your AI evangelists, and then they can go out and say, oh, look how much faster I'm getting my work done. And then you get feedback, and then you can iterate. And you can iterate on it and you can build in and you can build on it quickly. The less features you have, the faster you can build and the easier you can iterate and you can roll it out then much faster, right? So any learnings you can take, there's less complexity. I've also found that the simpler UI tends to just perform better, depending on your industry, depending on your workforce. Certain industries, for example, in like construction, for example, where you have an aging workforce, like they don't want to deal with a system that has a million features. They have these systems already and they don't use them, right? Give them a chat box and
Right.
that's it. And then they're good to go, right? And that's it. That's all they need. Just give them a chat box. Don't give them a million features, right? Give them a form and that's it. And then they're good to go. So we always like pull our clients back from over engineering, from too many features. It's very, very enticing, I know, because it's exciting, but start small and then iterate as you go.
I love that. That is a great framework with any technology, but I think it's super crucial for AI in general because you need those adopters, especially for folks who have maybe a little bit of an older workforce and they're a little bit more leery about it.
Yeah.
Having those folks who are your champion can make the difference between you getting your next 3 to 5 projects done rather than it being a one and this just doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I think AI is here to stay. I don't think it's going anywhere. I just think that we have to figure out how we're going to use it as entrepreneurs and really find how we're going to lean in and leverage it to be better at what we do.
Yes, absolutely.
I would love to hear your thoughts on a little bit around the risk with AI. Especially, we talked a little bit earlier about, how AI has hallucinations, and then on data privacy, as we're using all these tools, we want to make sure that our businesses are still safe
Mhm.
and that, we're putting out good information and everything else that we can do to make sure we serve our clients and customers as good as possible.
Yes, definitely. So I think one of the bigger risks comes with the off-the-shelf tools. I've seen, especially recently, specifically with ChatGPT, when you upload a document to it, it will frequently not read the document at all. So I always
Yep.
say expand the thinking, right? So like make sure that it's reading it. For things like analyzing documents, I would say go to Gemini or go to Claude. Those are much better at analyzing documents. But I will say I have also noticed a bit of a weird trend in these consumer-facing apps for OpenAI, Claude, and Google, that on the consumer facing side, it seems like they're taking away resources, because I've seen model drift in all three over the last maybe 2 to 3 months or so. Model drift is not new, and for anyone who doesn't know what model drift is when these companies, they make updates to their products, and because of the way that they're making updates, the quality of the output just isn't the same as it was when they originally released it. That's all it means. So it's just fancy language, but that's all it means. The quality is just not there anymore. It's not a new phenomenon, but what is kind of new is that it's happening to all of the three major players at once. And on the flip side, on the enterprise, so for their like development tools, companies like us that use these tools to build it, they're actually putting more resources behind it. So we're able to build significantly better products, but the consumers are experiencing worse quality. Complete 180 from what we saw last year. Last year, they were going all in on consumers and completely backed away from enterprise. So you never really know what they're going to do. If you're an end user, a consumer or a company, using these tools, verify the output. It is 100% true that it can hallucinate, or give you false information. So ask it things like share your, provide your source or cite your source. That's one. We already mentioned, don't use ChatGPT, at least right now. I don't know, it might change in the future, but right now it's half the time it does not read documents. Go to Claude, go to Gemini. I highly recommend Perplexity for search. It is very good with giving like well-sourced answers. But even there, always say, cite your, give me the link, give me the direct link, give me the source. Always verify it. That's on the consumer side. You want to also get good at prompting. If you are not familiar with prompt strategies like chain of thought, meta prompting, self-reflection, start learning those. There's resources available. We also provide trainings on those. Start learning those, because again, these models, they will make things up, and this is going to be your first line of defense in bad outputs, is learning how to talk to these models. If you are a business and you are building your own tools, or you're using the enterprise side, then you want to do things like have citations. It is absolutely critical. When you're building something like a chat assistant with all of your documents, all of your mass documents, knowledge bases, for example, make sure the user can go and click on the citation to pull up the document. So that's something that we always build in as like a must-have in there. Always disclose to your users that they're interacting with AI, and have a disclaimer that AI can make mistakes, because otherwise, like, it's it's going to be you that's on the line and liable for any bad AI output. There's many other risks. There's basic standard cybersecurity that you want to just best practices. You want to make sure that those are in place. But then there's some certain risk that is a little bit more unique to AI, something called prompt injection. So when you're building it, or when you're hiring someone to build it, just ask them, how are they handling it? I don't want, it's a technical thing, so this is not a technical audience. I don't want to go into those technicalities, but just make sure that they have a good answer for you. So
Gotcha.
address those issues and make sure that they know what they're talking about. And the last risk that I will mention is over-reliance on AI. I think that is a risk that people don't talk about very frequently. And one way you can mitigate it is by dedicating like AI-free days or AI-free periods, blocks of time for any core skill for any team to just kind of sharpen their skills. And AI free Fridays, for example. That's what we implemented in Lapis. We have AI free Fridays. So I make sure that on Fridays, I don't use AI for writing, for example. That's a core skill for me to have. And that way I can stay sharp, because AI is good often as an editor, but not as the creative source. You want your people as the creative source.
I love that. The AI Free Friday is definitely something that we will be looking into because I agree completely. You know, you do have to keep your skills sharp. And something else that you mentioned there that I think is worth a little bit of a dive into, we never know what these companies are going to do, right? It may be super affordable today. And, you know, if I think about how these large language models, how they work and what level of compute, what level of power, all of those things that come into it, those it could easily shift. And if your business is extremely reliant on AI and now it's cost prohibitive or they're not giving you all the data, as you mentioned, you know, because you need to work with the developer, you need to have a custom tool, all this stuff, it can really impact your business, especially if you're using it for core functions. Like, how do you communicate with the client? You should know that as a business professional. You know, it's great to smooth it up. I can definitely take a little bit of my colloquialisms and all the other stuff out of there, but you still want to be a human at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I will say explore open source. That's something that we're doing. So like when we build our systems, we're now starting to build them to be model agnostic, so that at a moment's notice, we can always change providers. We don't have to always use OpenAI or always use Claude. You know, OpenAI goes down, we can switch it to somebody else.
That's a great point. It also brings up another question that I have as well. It's around, you know, for small businesses, when do you have a differentiator on when they should look at, you know, moving away from the off the shelf standard version of things to maybe building something a little bit more custom?
Um, yes. So there are a couple of guidelines. I would say if your tool meeting is not meeting most of your needs, for example. So you've come to a point where you have, let's say, like maybe 70%, and you're below 70%, then you want to start looking at something custom. If you've scaled to a point where the tool is no longer meeting those needs, you want to look at something custom. If you're at a point where the costs you're beginning to see as you're scaling are already significantly, you know, just increasing, then it may be more beneficial to look at something custom. Those are, or if you're seeing that like maybe there's significant reduction in performance, like speed, you know, like latency, because you're layering, you know, much more data onto it, for example. That may be a time to start exploring it, right? Those I would say are probably the main reasons to start looking into it.
That's a great thing to know and understand. I think that, you know, just to call it back out, that 70% is a big number, right? So if you're trying to get a piece of your process to be faster or more efficient, if you're not getting 100% there, maybe time to give somebody like Olga a call to try to figure out what your next steps are and how to change that up so that you're really getting what you need out of AI. One other question I have is also around, you know, adoption. We get all these great tools, and I work with companies day in and day out to figure what they actually use and what they don't. So, what have you learned working with some of these frontline teams around adoption, especially when some of these people are really scared about their, you know, losing their job?
Yes, absolutely. First, you need to be honest with your people. So, like, you have to tell them you're not going to lose your job. If that's true, right? I mean, if they're going to lose their job, then, you know, this is a very different story.
Right.
If your goal is to implement AI so that you can fire half your staff, that's a very different story. But If your goal is genuinely to implement AI, which is what we recommend, we never recommend to implement AI so that you can fire your staff. That's not what we recommend. Our recommendation is always implement AI so that you can upskill your workforce and allocate their busy work to AI so that they can be more productive in areas where it counts, in strategy, in relationships, in there's so many areas, your core functions that are revenue driving, right? So having said that, you need to tell your people, if you use these tools, then these are the areas of your job that we intend to go away. And these are the areas that we intend for you to do more work in. For example, we will expect you to spend less time searching for information, and we will expect you to spend more time on your core function, whatever that core function is. If you're a lawyer, if you're an analyst, if you're an assistant answering phone calls, I don't know, whatever your core function is, right? But we've done research, and people will spend up to 30%, or at least, not up to, actually, at least 30% of their time on just busy work. At least 10% goes on finding information. Where is this report? Where is that document? What client did we do this thing for? I can't remember. Can you call Sally? Where is she? Hey, where is Sally? Who does Sally report to? This kind of stuff, right? So you say to your people, all of this stuff, you need to do less of that because AI is going to handle that. So you will be expected to do less of this and more of that. AI will now become a part of your job. So you will be expected to use the tools. It's not going to replace you, but if you don't use the tools, then maybe your job might be a jeopardy, right? That may be a little bit of a different shift. Make it fun. So we encourage companies to host hackathons or, competitions where everyone, regardless of technical skill level, can build something with AI, make something with AI without themselves writing a single line of code. And that single line of code is important because we want to make sure that, like, the engineers aren't winning all the, all the coffees and the chips and the prizes, right? So they can vibe code. Vibe coding is when you tell AI, may write a product or write a program, right? Make a website. That's called vibe coding. They can vibe code, but they are not allowed to themselves write the code. So make it fun, make a competition. Who can come up with the most creative use of AI in some way? Who can, come up with how we can use AI in our services and or with our customers or internally, right? And have a competition of some kind. That can bring people together. It can make things just more fun and actually reward them for it, like something meaningful, not just coffee, like really give them something meaningful so that they're actually striving towards, like, I don't know, maybe a week of PTO or something, but give them something that's going to count for them. PTO, I always think, is always a great motivator. That's just, I think, me personally, I think people will appreciate PTO more than they will, like, a coffee maker, probably. But of course,
I would for sure.
So that's a recommendation that we make, time with your family or whatever it is you want. And then you want to involve your people in the decision-making process as early as possible. So when you're building these tools, like when we come into a company to help them either implement a strategy or build something custom, or we're training them, we're always out there on the front lines with end users. So talk to the people who are going to be using the tools, not just corporate, not just management, because those two can be so completely disconnected from what the reality is in the day-to-day life of people. Completely different situations. So you want to make sure you're doing, this is just like product management 101 kind of stuff, right? User testing, user research. So talk to your people. What does their day-to-day workflow look like? and then you can figure out how you can slot AI into that workflow. But when they feel like they're involved in the conversation, there's less resistance to it. And then simplicity in UI. We touched on this already a little bit. The simpler the UI, the easier it is to adopt the new tool.
I love it. I think that's great, and I think the simplicity and really working with your team to give them the information as soon as possible is huge. I talked to another guest on the show earlier on whenever we were just getting started, and he said something that's really stuck with me. He said, AI is not going to replace people's jobs, but people who understand AI are going to be taking jobs of people who don't understand it and don't want to use it. And I think that's really true for a lot of companies because they're not really here to just get rid of people. I think we're all trying to be profitable. We're all trying to do the best deliveries we can. And AI is a big part of that. And I think I mentioned earlier, it's here to stay. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on what are some of the trends that we're seeing right now that you think are going to be lasting, not just something that's here today and gone tomorrow with AI.
So I think one of the things is skills that people are going to need to start to develop to be relevant in the workforce, and that are uniquely human. So the CEO of LinkedIn, he recently put out a post. I don't know if you saw that on skills that he thinks are going to be valuable, and I 100% agree with him. There is relationships, creativity, things like building trust, collaboration, right? All of these that used to be kind of soft skills, or at least soft skills by people who never had to sell anything in their life, right? Because
Right, exactly.
when it comes to when you have to sell something, it's that's not a soft skill, right? Relationships, likability, all of those things, those are human traits, and AI cannot take that away. And I don't think AI can help with customer service, and we've certainly built tools where AI will help with customer service. AI can help serve up a product for you that can, maybe match your preferences and help in sales in that way. But that's different from a human relationship. I still, at the end of the day, want to get on the phone and talk to a person. And there are companies out there that are still going to pay tens of thousands of dollars to have a representative, like human representative, that that is their account manager, right? And Chase private client is still going to be requiring you to have $1 million, or I don't know, whatever that amount is that they require you to have in the bank for you to be a private client, so that you have your own personal banker. So those things are not going to go away. I think AI is going to continue to get better at a lot of automation stuff, and people need to get better at the human stuff. So that's not going away.
I love that. And I really agree with that. And I think about how I do business. I want to talk to a human and I want to know that I'm not going to go to the AI loop from hell whenever I have a customer service problem or something else like that where I can't get support. So I think it's going to become more and more important on how we actually serve our clients, and we use AI to lean in and make things better, but we can't take away the human part because your consumer is not a bot. It's an actual person.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
one question I have for you as well on being an entrepreneur, a lot of times we really have to say no to clients or say no to taking somebody on. I'd love to hear what's a red flag that tells you to say no to a project or a particular client.
Um, if a person I would say is like cautious of AI, or thinks that like AI can't really solve anything, or it's just a fancy chatbot or something like that, if this is the kind of vibe that I get from a client, then it's, or it says like, oh, AI is, just there to replace people or something. If I get any vibe like that, then that is an automatic red flag for me. It is probably going to be like converting a priest. So I will
Right.
automatically say, okay, you're a non-believer, so why should I believe in you?
Exactly. That's a great perspective as well, because it is a partnership. It's not a one-way street. So I like what you're saying there. And last question to wrap us up that I always ask, I'd love to hear, what's one secret that you wish you would have known starting out as an entrepreneur?
Um, do more podcasts. I wish I would have been doing these more when I first started out. I do a lot of them now, but I wish I would have done more when I started out, and more speaking engagements. So I do that. I do a lot of them now, but it would have been good to know when I first started out.
I can agree and relate to that. Just I think the more you say what you do and what you believe, the easier it gets.
Yeah,
And that's part of being in sales, especially founder led sales, and everything that goes along with it.
exactly. Yeah.
Well, this has been great. I really appreciate it. And if our audience would like to get in touch with you and learn more about what you're working on, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Yes, they can reach me on LinkedIn. It's Olga Topchaya. I think I'm the only Olga Topchaya that does AI on there. Or they can contact us at info@lapisconsults.com on our website, lapisconsults.com. We also recently started a pilot for one-on-one coaching for people that are professionals or entrepreneurs that are just looking to get better at using AI tools and just learning AI for themselves. It's a new program that,
Awesome.
yes, and for listeners of this podcast, they're going to get a 20% discount. So please mention the podcast and just reach out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody for listening. If you have found today's conversation as valuable as I have, be sure to hit that like and follow button and share with somebody you know who's in business. And if you want more tips on how to grow your business between episodes, join us at C Suite Insiders group on Facebook. And until next time, keep growing and remember, you don't have to do this alone.